A man is sitting in the bar at a busy airport. A beautiful woman walks in and sits down next to him. He presumes, because she's got a uniform on, she's probably an off-duty flight attendant. So he decides to have a go at picking her up by identifying the airline she flies for, thereby impressing her greatly. He leans across to her and says the Delta airline motto. "We love to fly and it shows." The woman looks at him blankly. He sits back and thinks up another line. He leans forward again and delivers the Air France motto. "Winning the hearts of the world." Again she just stares at him with a slightly puzzled look on her face. Undeterred, he tries again, this time saying the Malaysian Airlines motto. "Going beyond expectations." The woman looks at him wearily and says, "What the heck do you want, moron?" He says, sitting back with a smile on his face. "American Airlines."
Years ago, a man needs to take a flight. As he gets to his plane seat, he is surprised to find a parrot strapped into the seat next to him. Once in the air, the stewardess comes round and the man asks her for a coffee. The parrot meanwhile squawks, "And get me a bloody whiskey, you moron." The stewardess, somewhat taken aback, remains composed and brings a whiskey for the parrot, but forgets the coffee. When the man points this out to her, the parrot immediately drains its glass and yells, "And get me another darn whiskey while you're at it, idiot." Visibly upset, the shaking stewardess returns shortly with a whiskey for the parrot, but still no coffee. Unaccustomed to such slackness, the man loses his temper and decides to try the parrot's approach. "I've asked you twice for a coffee, moron, now go and get it or I'll give you a slap." In a couple of seconds, two burly disguised security personnel grab both him and the parrot, take them to the emergency exits and throw them out. As they are falling from the plane, the parrot turns to the man and says, "You know, for someone who can't fly, you've got a big mouth." An Airbus 380 is on its way across the Atlantic. It flies consistently at 800 kilometers per hour in 30,000 feet, when suddenly a Eurofighter with tempo Mach 2 appears. The pilot of the fighter jet slows down, flies alongside the Airbus and greets the pilot of the passenger plane by radio, "Airbus flight, boring flight isn't it? Take care and have a look here." He rolls his jet on its back, accelerates, breaks through the sound barrier, rises rapidly to a dizzying height, only to swoop down almost to sea level in a breathtaking dive. He loops back next to the Airbus and asks, "Impressive?" The Airbus pilot answers, "Very impressive, but now have a look here." The jet pilot watches the Airbus, but nothing happens. It continues to fly stubbornly straight, with the same speed. After 5 minutes, the Airbus pilot radioed, "Well, do you have to say now?" "What did you do?" asked the confused fighter pilot. "I didn't see anything impressive." The other laughs and says, "I got up, stretched my legs, went to the back of the flight to the bathroom, got a cup of coffee and a cinnamon cake and made plans for a date with a stewardess tonight." Impressive?
A man boarded an airplane and took his seat. As he settled in, he glanced up and saw an unusually beautiful woman boarding the plane. He soon realized she was heading straight toward his seat. Lo and behold, she took the seat right beside his. Eager to strike up a conversation, he blurted out, "Business trip or vacation?" She turned, smiled and said, "Business. I'm going to the annual Zool Studies convention in Chicago." He swallowed hard. Here was the gorgeous woman he had ever seen sitting next to him, and she was going to a meeting about studies. Struggling to maintain his composure, he calmly asked, "What's your business role at this convention?" "Lecturer," she responded. "I use my extensive personal experience to share interesting facts about zoology." "Really?" He gulped. "Like what?" "Well," she explained. "For instance, Native American Indians are the most passionate, while Jewish men are the most likely to satisfy a woman fully. And in terms of lasting the longest, surprisingly it's the southern redneck." Saying this, she became a little uncomfortable and blushed. "I'm sorry," she said. "I shouldn't really be discussing this with you. I don't even know your name." "Oh," said the man, holding out his hand. "Tonto Goldstein, at your service. But my friends call me Bubba."
So Seamus and Johnny were riding a flight on Philippine Airlines, everything was going smoothly, and then something went wrong with the engine. Sirens were blaring in the cockpit, and the pilot issued a PSA to the cabin saying, "Dear passengers, this is your captain speaking. Unfortunately, we have lost one engine, but do not worry, I will ensure your safety." The plane lands on water, and the captain calmly says, "Hello passengers, we have successfully landed on the water, I hope all of you are fine. Now, all of the people who can swim, please go to the right side of the plane. The people who can't, please go to the left." Johnny mentioned to Seamus, "See, this is what I love about this airline, they always have backup plans for every situation." Seamus replied, "Yeah, Pear, I agree, the crew seems well trained for these situations." After everyone was arranged according to their swimming abilities, the captain spoke, "Everyone who can are on the right side of the plane, please evacuate the plane immediately and carefully. And to those on the left side of the plane, thank you for flying Philippine Airlines."
A stats professor plans to travel to a conference by plane. When he passes the security check, they discover a bomb in his carry-on baggage. Of course, he is hauled off immediately for interrogation. "I don't understand it," the interrogating officer exclaims. "You're an accomplished professional, a caring family man, a pillar of your parish, and now you want to destroy that all by blowing up an airplane." "Sorry," the professor interrupts him. "I had never intended to blow up the plane." "So, for what reason else did you try to bring a bomb on board?" "Let me explain. Statistics shows that the probability of a bomb being on an airplane is 1/1000. That's quite high if you think about it, so high that I wouldn't have any peace of mind on a flight." "And what does this have to do with you bringing a bomb on board of a plane?" asked the surprised interrogator. "You see," explained the professor, "since the probability of one bomb being on my plane is 1/1000, the chance that there are two bombs is 1/10000000. If I already bring one, the chance of another bomb being around is actually 1/10000000, and I am much safer."
A beautiful woman is sitting next to a teenage boy on a plane. There is terrible turbulence, and then the plane goes into a sudden nosedive. The captain comes on the intercom and says, "I hate to have to tell you this, folks, but we might not walk away from this one." Everyone begins to panic except for the boy, who sheepishly turns to the woman and says, "I hate to trouble you, miss, but we might die, and I've never kissed anyone." The woman is at first taken aback, but after a moment realizes she might as well make the kid happy in their final moments. She passionately kisses him. The boy, elated, goes on, "Sorry to bother you again after such a lovely kiss, but we might die, and I've never felt a breast." Again the woman is taken aback, but decides there is no harm in it and slides his hand under her shirt. After a good long feel, the boy again says, "You've been so kind already, but please, I don't want to die never having made love to a woman." Already committed to helping this boy have new experiences before they die, the woman smiles and begins to undo his belt. Just then the plane levels off. As everyone exits the plane, they shake hands with the captain and congratulate him. The woman walks off the plane. She says, "Thank you so much for saving us from certain death." The boy says, "Just a little longer next time, Dad."
A leather worker was flying to Australia when his plane crashed. As bad luck would have it, he got separated from the rest of the floating passengers and found himself stranded on a small deserted island. Desperate to survive, the leather worker searches the island for food to eat. Luckily, he finds a herd of docile cows on the island. He successfully hunts one of the cows and skillfully cleans and prepares the cow's skin and meat for himself. With a steady supply of food, the leather worker knew it was time to find a way off the island. He decides to make a large canopy out of the cow's leather, and use some leaves to spell out S.O.S that could easily be seen from above. A few days later, a passing plane spots the message and calls a ship to rescue the man. It just goes to show you that when all else fails, the best thing to do is to hide in plain sight.
IC-130 was lumbering along when a cocky F-16 flashed by. The jet jockey decided to show off and told the C-130 pilot, "Watch this," and promptly went into a barrel roll followed by a steep climb. He then finished with a sonic boom as he broke the sound barrier. The F-16 pilot asked the C-130 pilot what he thought of that. The C-130 pilot said, "That was impressive, but watch this." The C-130 droned along for about 5 minutes, and then the C-130 pilot came back on and said, "What did you think of that?" Puzzled, the F-16 pilot asked, "What the heck did you do?" The C-130 pilot chuckled. "I stood up, stretched my legs, walked to the back, took a leak, then got a cup of coffee and a cinnamon roll." And the lesson? When you are young and foolish, speed and flash may seem a good thing. When you get older and smarter, comfort and boredom is not such a bad thing. Us older folks understand this one. It's called SOS, slower, older, and smarter.
Abe and Esther are flying to Australia for a 2-week vacation to celebrate their 40th anniversary. Suddenly, over the public address system, the captain announces, "Ladies and gentlemen, I am afraid I have some very bad news. Our engines have ceased functioning and we will attempt an emergency landing. Luckily, I see an uncharted island below us and we should be able to land on the beach. However, odds are that we may never be rescued and will have to live on the island for the rest of our lives." Thanks to the skill of the flight crew, the plane lands safely on the island. An hour later, Abe turns to his wife and asks, "Esther, did we pay our $5,000 PBS pledge check yet?" "No, sweetheart," she responds. Abe, still shaken from the crash landing, then asks, "Esther, did we pay our American Express card yet?" "Oh no. I'm sorry. I forgot to send the check," she says. "One last thing, Esther. Did you remember to send checks for the Visa and MasterCard this month?" he asks. "Oi, forgive me, Abby," begged Esther. "I didn't send that one either." Abe grabs her and gives her the biggest kiss in 40 years. Esther pulls away and asks him, "What was that for?" Abe answers, "Our problems are over. There's no way they will fail to find us now."
A blonde and a lawyer are sitting next to each other on a plane. The lawyer asks the blonde if she wants to play a game. "All you have to do is ask a question, and if I get it wrong or don't know, I'll give you $5. Then I ask you a question, and if you get it wrong you pay me $5. "No," she says. "I just want to sleep." He keeps asking, and she finally gives in when he says he will pay her $500, but she still only has to pay $5. "What's the distance from the Earth to the Moon?" he asks. She gives him $5. "What goes up the hill with 4 legs and comes down with 5, she asks. He pulls out his laptop and searches it, but finds nothing. Then he emails his friends. After an hour, he still hasn't got an answer. He hands her $500. Then he asks her, "So what is the answer?" She hands him $5.
Matt and his wife lived in the country. Matt was very stingy and hated spending money. One day a fair came to the nearby town. "Let's go to the fair, Matt," his wife said. "We haven't been anywhere for a long time." Matt thought about this for a while. He knew he would have to spend money at the fair. At last he said, "All right, but I'm not going to spend much money. We'll look at things, but we won't buy anything." They went to the fair and looked at all the things to buy. There were many things Matt's wife wanted to buy, but he would not let her spend any money. Then, in a nearby field, they saw a small, old-looking airplane. "Fun flight," the notice said. $20 for 10 minutes. Matt had never been in an airplane and he wanted to go on a fun flight. However, he didn't want to have to pay for his wife, as well. "I've only got $20. he told the pilot. Can my wife come with me for free? The pilot wasn't selling many tickets. So he said, I'll make a bargain with you. If both of you can hold from screaming or shouting the whole flight, you won't have to pay for her. Matt agreed, and got into the small airplane with his wife. The pilot took off and made his airplane do all kinds of things, up and down and all around, tricks, fast turns, everything he could to scare them. But they never uttered a word. Eventually the pilot said, Okay, we'll land now. None of you made a sound, so you can have her ride for free. Thank you, Matt said. Wasn't easy, especially when she fell out.
A distinguished young woman on a flight from Switzerland asked the priest seated beside her, Father, may I ask a favor? What is it you wish of me, my son? Well, I bought an expensive electronic hairdryer that is well over the customs limits, and I'm afraid they'll confiscate it. Is there any way you could carry it through customs for me? Under your robes, perhaps? I would love to help you, dear, but I must warn you, I will not lie. With your honest face, Father, no one will question you. When they got to customs, she let the priest go ahead of her. The official asked, Father, do you have anything to declare? From the top of my head down to my waist, I have nothing to declare. The official thought this answer strange, so asked, And what do you have to declare from your waist to the floor? I have a marvelous little instrument designed to be used on a woman, but which is, to date, unused. Roaring with laughter, the official said, Go ahead, Father. Next.
A jumbo jet is on its final approach coming into Toronto Airport. The pilot comes on the intercom. This is your captain speaking. We're on our final descent into Toronto. I want to thank you for flying with us today, and I hope you enjoy your stay in Toronto. He forgot to switch off the intercom. Now the whole plane can hear his conversation from the cockpit. The co-pilot says to the pilot, Well, skipper, what you gonna do in Toronto? Well, says the skipper, first I'm gonna check into the hotel and take a big crap. Then I'm gonna take that new stewardess with the huge tits out for dinner. Then I'm gonna wine and dine her, take her back to my room and give it to her big time all night. Everyone on the plane hears this and immediately begins looking up and down the aisle trying to get a look at the new stewardess. Meanwhile, the new stewardess is at the very back of the plane. She's so embarrassed that she starts to run to try and get to the cockpit to turn the intercom off. Halfway down the aisle, she trips over an old lady's bag and down she goes. The old lady leans over and says, No need to hurry, dear. He's gotta use the bathroom first. Wife says to husband, Let's try the missionary position. Husband, what's that? Wife, I stay here and you feck off to Africa.
A photographer from a well-known national magazine was assigned to cover the fires at Yellowstone National Park. The magazine wanted to show the heroic work of the firefighters as they battled the blaze. When the photographer arrived, he realized that the smoke was so thick that it would seriously impede or make it impossible for him to photograph anything from ground level. He requested permission to rent a plane and take photos from the air. His request was approved and arrangements were made. He was told to report to a nearby airport where a plane would be waiting for him. He arrived at the airport and saw a plane warming up near the gate. He jumped in with his bag and shouted, Let's go. The pilot swung the little plane into the wind, and within minutes they were in the air. The photographer said, Fly over the park and make 2 or 3 low passes so I can take some pictures. Why? Asked the pilot. Because I am a photographer, he responded, and photographers take photographs. The pilot was silent for a moment. Finally he stammered, You mean you're not the flight instructor?
As the crowded airliner is about to take off, the peace is shattered by a 5-year-old boy who picks that moment to throw a wild temper tantrum. No matter what his frustrated, embarrassed mother does to try to calm him down, the boy continues to scream furiously and kick the seats around him. Suddenly, from the rear of the plane, an elderly man in the uniform of an Air Force general is seen slowly walking forward up the aisle. Stopping the flustered mother with an upraised hand, the white-haired, courtly, soft-spoken general leans down and, motioning toward his chest, whispers something into the boy's ear. Instantly, the boy calms down, gently takes his mother's hand, and quietly fastens his seat belt. All the other passengers burst into spontaneous applause. As the general slowly makes his way back to his seat, one of the cabin attendants touches his sleeve. "Excuse me, General," she asks quietly, "but could I ask you what magic words you used on that little boy?" The old man smiles serenely and gently confides, "I showed him my pilot's wings, service stars, and battle ribbons, and explained that they entitle me to throw one passenger out the plane door, on any flight I choose."
A bush pilot drops Bob and Ted, two moose hunters, at a remote lake in northern Ontario. He tells them that he'll be back in a week, and warns them that his plane won't be able to take off with more than one moose. The next week he returns, and sure enough, the hunters have bagged two moose. The pilot tells them there's no way they can take off with the two moose. Ted says, "I don't know, the pilot last year took off with two moose." To which Bob adds, "Yeah, but maybe he wasn't a total coward." Not wanting to be outdone, the pilot loads up everything and they start to move down the lake. The plane is gathering speed, but the pines on the shore are rapidly approaching. Finally, the plane gets airborne, but one wing clips the top of a tree. The plane spins, crashes into the trees, and breaks apart. Sometime later Ted regains consciousness and begins searching for his buddy. He finds him, and when he wakes him up Bob asks, "Do you have any idea where we are?" Ted replies, "I think about 200 yards further than last year."
An arrogant professor boards a plane and gets a seat beside an old man. Mid-flight, the professor decides to play a game with the old man and prove he's intellectually superior, so he turns to him and says, "Hey, do you want to play a little game with me?" The old man looks at him and says, "Depends. What type of game?" The professor goes on to explain the game. Taking turns, we'll ask each other one question at a time. If the other knows the answer, the asker gives him $1, and if he doesn't, he gives $1 to the asker. Want to play? The professor grins, knowing his general knowledge is vastly superior. To his dismay, the old man refuses. Determined to make him agree, the professor raises the stakes for him. "If I lose, I'll give you $2 instead of $1. No, $5. No, $10. I told you no." Desperate, the professor makes one final offer. "If I lose, I'll give you $100, and if you lose, you'll only give me $1. The professor pleads. The old man ponders this, then sighs. "Only if I get to start." And the professor immediately agrees. "Ask away," the professor says, confident he'll never lose. The old man asks, "What has 5 heads, 40 feet, and lives inside of a bucket?" The professor turns the riddle over in his head, trying to find anything that fits the description. After an hour of intense concentration, the professor gives up. Grumbling, he pulls out his wallet and gives the old man $100. He wastes no time and asks him, "So what has 5 heads, 40 feet, and lives inside of a bucket?" The old man smiles and says, "I've got no idea. Here's your $1.
A flight crew is landing at an unfamiliar airport. The control tower gives them a runway assignment, and they start their approach. The pilot says, "Does that runway look kind of short to you?" The co-pilot says, "It sure does. I thought it was supposed to be longer than that." "Me too, better set full flaps." Full flaps set. "I want thrust reversers the minute we touch." Standing by on the thrust reversers. And full power once thrust reversers are set. Roger that. I'm gonna try to catch the very end of the runway and stand on the brakes. Stand by to reverse thrust. Roger that. They touch down, blast the thrust reversers, stomp the brakes, and just manage to get the plane stopped before it runs off into the grass. GPD in heaven, panted the pilot. That was the shortest runway I've ever landed on. His co-pilot says, yeah, but look how wide it is.
It just happens that a long time ago, and for the first time in their lives, two country boys take their first flight from Florida to New York. While they're talking to each other, they get interrupted by an announcement from the pilot. Sorry to disturb you all, but I think it's best you know one of our engines has failed. Don't worry, we can still make it on 3 engines, but there'll be a delay of 1 hour. So they begin talking again, but soon another announcement is heard. We regret to inform you that our second engine has failed, which will mean another delay of 1 hour, but don't worry, we'll still make it. So the two grumble a bit, but not for long, as the pilot's voice is heard again after a few minutes. Unfortunately, our third engine has failed, meaning there'll be a delay of another hour to the journey. One of them turns to his friend and says, well darn, if that last engine fails, we'll be up here all night.
An old man, a schoolboy, a lawyer, a doctor, and a community service worker are all on a plane with only 4 parachutes when the pilot of the plane has a stroke and passes away. As the plane plummets its passengers to death, the 5 members of the aircraft argue over who deserve to have the 4 bags containing the parachutes. Social worker, I deserve to live because I protect vulnerable children and support families in need of assistance. The social worker grabs the nearest bag and plummets out of the aircraft. Lawyer, I deserve to live because I advocate for my clients through my sharp wit and massive knowledge. The lawyer grabs the second bag and plummets out of the aircraft. Doctor, I deserve to live because I help diagnose ill people with my specialized training. The doctor grabs the third bag and plummets out of the aircraft. This leaves only the schoolboy and the old man in the plane with it descending toward the ground. Old man, go ahead boy. Take the last parachute. You have many years ahead of you while I am just an old man who doesn't have as many years left. Schoolboy, don't worry, we can both take a parachute. Look, there are still 2 left. The old man just stares in shock. What? But those 3? Remember the lawyer with the sharp wit and the massive knowledge? He took my school backpack.
A travel agent looked up from his desk to see an older lady and an older gentleman peering in the shop window at the posters showing the glamorous destinations around the world. The agent had had a good week, and the dejected couple looking in the window gave him a rare feeling of generosity. He called them into his shop and said, I know that on your pension you could never hope to have a holiday, so I am sending you off to a fabulous resort at my expense, and I won't take no for an answer. He took them inside and asked his secretary to write 2 flight tickets and book a room in a 5-star hotel. They, as can be expected, gladly accepted, and were on their way. About a month later, the little lady came into his shop. And how did you like your holiday? He asked eagerly. The flight was exciting and the room was lovely, she said. I've come to thank you. But one thing puzzled me. Who was that old guy I had to share the room with?
A guy gets on a plane and finds himself seated next to a cute blonde. He immediately turns to her and makes his move. You know, he says, I've heard that flights will go quicker if you strike up a conversation with your fellow passenger. So let's talk. The blonde, who had just opened her book, closes it slowly and says to the guy, what would you like to discuss? Oh, I don't know, says the guy. Wanting to impress her, he says, how about nuclear power? Okay, says the blonde. That could be an interesting topic, but let me ask you a question first. A horse, a cow, and a deer all eat the same stuffed grass. Yet the deer excretes little pellets, the cow turns out a flat patty, and the horse produces muffins of dried poop. Why do you suppose that is? The guy is dumbfounded. Finally, he replies, I haven't the slightest idea. So tell me, says the blonde, how is it that you feel qualified to discuss nuclear power when you don't know jack? Asterisk T. Thanks for the laughs. Subscribe for more fun. Until next time, stay tuned and stay amused.